Hi guys, and welcome to another video of my Getting Into TV series. This week I'm joined by James Taylor, who is the chairperson of the unscripted TV committee for BECTU. This week we discuss things like being a good runner, the top tips you need for starting out, as well as what BECTU can do for you, and exactly what is BECTU. He also runs his own podcast, which he's just launched episode 1.
See my friends and colleagues who are brilliant at their jobs leaving. It's a loss to the industry, but more importantly out of all this, what's the human cost?
Yeah, it becomes a bit of an ongoing joke. We want to leave, we're burnt out, what else could we do? I'm British Asian.
If you want to check out the whole thing, there will be a link down below. Other than that, let's get on with today's video.
I mean, first off, really, I was just hoping to start talking about your career, really. How did you enter the industry and what you're doing now?
Gosh, it's a very good question. I mean, if you're going really way back, when I was a student, the first bit of TV stuff I did, I actually in the summer holidays worked for a company that did sort of corporate video and helped out on doing stuff for that. I think they only paid me 50 quid a day, but I was happy with that back then. And then after that, my university course ended with a 3-month placement at the BBC in children's programs, and I ended up staying there 3 years. So that sort of gave me the foundation and everything that I needed to sort of go on from there. And yeah, I've been doing it ever since, and it's sort of 19 years this year. Like
yourself, I went to university, and one question that always pops up to a lot, like whenever I go to events and talking to people wanting to get into TV, they always ask me, was it worth it? What would you say? Was uni worth it for you, or do you think other ways, that there's better ways into the industry? The truth is, like you've hinted, I think it's slightly complicated, and perhaps the easiest way to describe it is that everyone's journey and everyone's career in TV is individual. And so it's whatever works for you. I know a lot of people who didn't go to university and have had very successful careers in TV. And actually, because they didn't go to uni, they're essentially 3 years ahead of their peers who are the same age. But it really worked for me. Like I said, it got me that placement at the BBC. And that led on directly to a job, and that sort of was the foundation of my career, and sort of I still draw on that knowledge and that experience today. I think that whatever is right for you, which probably isn't necessarily an easy answer to hear. So if you are someone who wants to get into TV, don't be intimidated and don't feel like you have to do one thing or another. If you don't feel you want to go to university, then don't do it. And there are other ways to get into TV, and it certainly isn't a requirement to work in the industry. I would say good communication skills, good attention to detail and creativity are sort of the main things you need. And I don't think that you necessarily need to go to university. And if you do go to university, you don't necessarily have to do what a lot of people call a media studies degree. I did broadcasting, but actually most people I know who work in TV who are successful didn't necessarily do that. And actually they have their own, not specialism necessarily, but they've done lots of other degrees. And that also gives them a sort of secondary knowledge that is actually quite useful in TV sometimes. But the main thing that I would say to that is it doesn't matter if you do or you don't. And you make your career path. And perhaps it is the most difficult part of joining the industry is that step to get into it. And that can be the most difficult and intimidating parts. What advice would you give to people starting out? Where would you say is a good place to go and find these jobs? I mean, you've got things like the Facebook runner groups, and Screen Skills do amazing courses that are really good. What advice would you give?
So I think the good news is that I think it's probably got better than when I started out. Let's face it, the industry is still very nepotistic, and it can be a lot about who you know, which it shouldn't be. But when I started, those 3 months that I did at the BBC were unpaid, and I was privileged enough to be able to do that and have some support from my family, and that meant I could move to London and get that experience. And not everyone can do that. But the good news is that it's standard now that anyone who works in the industry as a runner or entry position has to be paid at least minimum wage, which I think is a much fairer way of doing it. I think my advice is that, you know, there's a lot of great schemes that you can join. There's a lot of new starter positions that you can go for, and I think it's looking for them and being prepared just to apply for as many as you can. And you know, the thing that I did when I started out was I didn't take no for an answer. And so if someone couldn't give me a job themselves, I'd sometimes go back and I'd say, well, if you can't give me one, is there anyone else you know who might have something? But also, I would say the most important thing in TV, you know, is doing the job and getting the experience, which I realize it can be cyclical. And you think, well, how do I get the experience if I can't get the job? It can be difficult to make that initial step. Once you do manage to make it, I think it is a lot easier because you've got that experience, you put it on your CV. But also technology these days allows you to do so much more. Like, I think it's great that you can make your own YouTube videos like you are today. You know, you can show off those skills without needing access to broadcast equipment, which you used to. So I think hopefully it's becoming a bit more democratic, but there's still a long way to go to make things fairer. And do you know what? For me, I'm always looking for good runners, good researchers. Really good runners can be really difficult to find. And so when you find a good one, you want to keep hold of them. And then they end up becoming researchers. And then you're really annoyed because someone who was really good at that job has moved on to the next one. And now you need to find a new runner. So if you're good, I honestly, it makes such a world of difference. If you're keen and you're interested, then absolutely, you know, you should really go for it.
What would you say is a good runner then?
So for me, a good runner is someone, and maybe again, it's easy for me to think back to when I first started out. Although it's a bit weird that I'm using myself as a template. I don't know.
I feel that's fine. You're allowed to do that.
But yeah, I think a good runner is someone who is keen and eager to sort of learn and get on with things, but also is really attentive. And I think it's a really difficult skill to teach someone. So in that way, it's sort of difficult to quantify. But certainly for me, when I'm on a shoot, you know, it's that person who's anticipating the next thing that's happening, or seeing something and preventing something from having an impact on the shoot, or stopping that person over there from crossing the back of shot, or it's just little things like that and then, or like anticipating, right, okay, I can see the crew are flagging now, they've been going for ages, I'm going to get them a round of teas. It's just things like that I think are you know, the bread and butter, I suppose, of being a runner. But also, of course, you know, being on the shoot itself isn't the only place that you are as a runner. You will spend a lot of time in an office. Again, I think it's being attentive to the needs of those around you, and realizing that as a runner, you'll get to do a bit of everything. But if you're good, then you will get more opportunities. And if you put the effort in, people will see that, and they'll want to give you chances, and they'll want to help you learn. And I think I always remember I was always really curious, and I'd ask lots of questions, and I'd try to make sure that they weren't annoying to people, but I'd always want to know why and how people were doing things. And so that for me is a good runner. It's someone who can anticipate the needs of everyone around them, essentially, and making sure that things are running as smoothly as possible.
Well, I stepped up in June last year for the first time, but I loved being a runner, and I would happily run. Like, again, I absolutely loved it, because I think one of the best things about being a runner is the fact you get to meet everyone as well. Usually you get to meet everyone, you get to meet every department. So I think it's a really interesting job to be part of. I would say it's the best thing.
Tom, I'm so glad you said that. I loved being a runner, honestly. It's so interesting. And like I say, you get to, you know, work with everyone pretty much. So across the whole production. And I think that's a really good way, actually, of working out what you want to do in your career, seeing what other people do, and seeing if, you know, if that's the direction you want to go in. So do you want to work on the production side of things? Are you a very logistical person, or are you more editorial? Are you more interested in the story, or are you more technical? Do you want to be camera op or editor or something like that? Although of course those jobs are very creative as well. So it gives you a chance to do lots of different things, and I think work out probably what you want to do. But also, actually, my other bit of advice is, while you're early in your career, is try lots of different sort of facets of the industry. So spend some time in casting and work out if that's for you. Spend some time setting shoots up and going on shoots and doing that. Spend some time working in an edit house and sort of seeing if that's what you want to do. And I think if you do that, you can't go wrong, because you'll gain loads of valuable experience that you can bring from one job to the next. And actually, some of the best producers that I work with actually used to be coordinators, and it's because they think very logically, and it means they can organize things really well, but then they've also bring an extra sort of dimension to that job. And I think things like that, you can never go wrong. It can be difficult to move between jobs as well. So if you've gone down the production route, it can be difficult to get into editorial, but it does happen. Like I say, I know several people that have done that, and they're brilliant producers.
You shouldn't really limit yourself.
That's it. And actually, one of the benefits of freelance life is that you do get to choose your own career path, and you do get to decide where you want to go and what you want to do. And I mean, obviously that you have to pay the bills still, and
exactly.
that's why it can be difficult, because you can ultimately end up almost pigeonholing yourself. Mm-hmm. Because you get offered jobs with in genres that you've worked in specifically before, or types of jobs that you've done, and then before you know it, you've done 5 of them in a row, and people are looking at your CV and thinking, "Oh, you've done a lot of that. Is that all you can do?" Yeah. But yeah, I would say that be tenacious, and if you want to move from one part of the industry to another, or from one side of the industry to another, then just do it and really push for it. And all anyone can do really is say no, and if that's the worst that can happen, at least you've got your other things to fall back on as well.
And at least you've tried, I suppose. It's better to have tried than not.
Find out what you like, find your niche. And if you don't want a niche, move about and do different things. I've purposefully varied up my career and worked in different genres. And I think every one that I've done, it brings a different perspective slightly to it. So and the same for different job roles and working in different departments. You bring something new, you bring something different. It can freshen things up a little bit.
It's generally one of the best industries, I think, for the fact that you can do something completely different all the time. I just want to move on to my next question, really. The industry is so fun. You can have so much fun with it. You can do so many great things. But I suppose there are some negatives to it. I mean, that's the same with any job. There's pros and cons to everything. What would you say to someone starting out to be aware of?
The industry can be a tough place to work. It asks a lot of you. I've missed friends' weddings, I've missed families' birthdays, and actually that was earlier in my career, and I didn't feel I could say no to not working. But actually what I find is that if you're honest with people and you talk to people, usually that they'll respect things like that. But then, having said that, of course, if you know that you've got a wedding coming up and you take a job, you ask when the shoot dates are, and if you know that that's when the shoot is and those dates are non-negotiable, you have to weigh up yourself. Would you rather have a job for 3 months, or would you rather go to that one wedding? And it's a difficult trade-off. It really, really is. So the industry can ask a lot of you, and it can be demanding of your hours and your weekends, and it does take over your life. Perhaps it is more of a lifestyle sometimes than a job. I think that is something to be very aware of. And actually, there are roles like in production. People tend to be sometimes in staff roles. That is more common, and so but editorial side of things, which is what I do, you don't really find many staff jobs anymore, and so you have to.
I've ever come across any myself. It's usually always been either 3 months to 9 months is usually the longest contracts I've seen.
Yeah, and so I think you have to, like you say, you have to be very aware of that going into it. But then, having said that, there are things that the industry needs to do to change as well, and it needs to get better at, because I think what has happened is that there's been a gradual transition over the time that I've been in the industry, so almost 20 years, from people working, there's always been a large portion of freelancers since I've been in the industry, but it's moved from a smaller percentage to the majority. And I think that's happened over a sort of a long amount of time. And so there are certain things that I hope that they are unintentional in the way that freelancers are engaged, and the way that we're hired, and the way that we're looked after or not, as the case may be, by some productions. And so I think it's, one of the positive things is that we're now having a conversation about it, and we're hopefully able to move things in the right direction for people. Because the thing is, it's really important as an industry that we keep hold of experience and we keep hold of people. And otherwise we're at risk of a brain drain of people leaving the industry, because it isn't accessible to you if you have, for example, childcare or other caring responsibilities, or if you're a disabled person and you can't get reasonable adjustments, or if you're a person of color and perhaps you're facing pressures from your own family to work in a stable job. I actually spoke to someone and had that exact conversation last week. They said that they want to leave the industry. One of the factors is that they're getting pressure from their family, who they're a second generation immigrant, and their family expected them to be in a stable job like a doctor or a lawyer. For them, that's putting extra pressure on them in an already tough industry. We are uniquely positioned in our industry, specifically in TV. I honestly believe that we have a responsibility to reflect society back to itself, and I think that's a really tough thing to do. But it's really important we have the lived experiences of people from all corners of society and reflect that on screen and bring it forward. And if we don't make the industry accessible to everyone, and make sure that we make it an easier place to work, whether that be reasonable adjustments, or job sharing, or working adjusted hours, and things like that, will help us keep really good people and good talent in the industry. Because otherwise what will end up happening is that we end up getting new people in the industry who then need to be trained up, and that sort of, we lose all that talent, and it costs money to train people up and get them to where they need to be. I think it's a really important thing to talk about.
So obviously you are the chair of the unscripted committee for BECTU, and BECTU, I mean, to start off with, can you explain what BECTU is to people that don't know? Because when I started out, I only really learned of BECTU early last year. I don't think it's something that in my university anyway that was advertised. So yeah, can you just explain what it is, and what can it do for people and for the industry?
You know what, Tom? You aren't the only one, and historically, that there hasn't been a high union membership certainly amongst freelancers in unscripted TV, and it's only in the last year or two that things have changed. And actually, it was the pandemic that really moved that on, and I think it gave everyone the opportunity to step back and think about our industry and the way that we're hired and the way that we work. When the pandemic hit, and a lot of people ended up having contracts cancelled or jobs finished early, it made everyone take a step back and think, is this what we want? And one of the positives to come out of it, I think, was that we all started talking to each other, and as freelancers, and different freelancer groups came together to have a conversation. But to answer your question, BECTU is the union for a lot of the creative industries. So as well as TV, it represents people in film and theatre and other communications industries. And essentially the Unscripted TV Union, UTVU, is a new branch of BECTU. And the idea is that we're representing freelancers who work in unscripted TV. So, and to be honest, unscripted as a word is a fairly new thing that people are using. And some people are like, what the hell is unscripted? Essentially, it's anything that isn't drama. And of course, it doesn't really make sense in lots of ways, because even though I work in factual TV, I still write a script. So it's still
the bane of people's lives.
So we don't just turn up and press record and hope for the best. I mean, sometimes you do that. What the UTVU is there to do now is to hopefully have this conversation about how we can make the industry a better place for freelancers and for everyone working in the industry. The great thing about our branch is that it brings together people who work both on the production side of things and on the editorial side of things. And in the union, they've never done that before. They've always sort of kept things quite separate. But I think in unscripted TV, we face the same issues, both on the editorial and the production side of things, in that, unfortunately, we're in a world of shrinking budgets and shrinking schedules, which ultimately puts a lot of pressure on freelancers. I suppose as chair of the committee for that branch, it's my job to say, look, the more people who join, and please do join, but the more people who join the branch, the louder your voice. I think we need to just make sure that we look after people. And do you know what? From my point of view, as someone who runs teams as well, in my experience, I always try and make sure that people are looked after. And the main simple reason is, if you look after your team, they'll look after you. And actually, it has a really positive impact on screen as well, because you can really tell, when a show is being done well and people are being looked after, they'll go the extra mile. They'll give that extra 10%, and that 10% can be magic, and it can really give you that TV gold, to use a TV cliche, but it does make a big difference. And I think it's just things like that and that can help. And I guess what I would hope is that BECTU in the coming months and years can represent freelancers from the unscripted genres. And actually, the Coalition for Change has already done a brilliant job of bringing lots of people together to have that conversation. But what I hope that BECTU can do is if you join, that essentially you can feel a lot more confidence in that you're protected and that you are being looked after. There's somewhere for you to go if something goes wrong, and it's essentially, someone's got your back.
Well, if anyone listening fancies reading up more about BECTU or fancies joining, there will be a link down below. So
actually, there is still a special offer for people to join the unscripted branch, which is for your first year. It's only £7.50 a month. So after that, it does go up, but basically £7.50 for a month for your first year is a fantastic offer, and you get so much for it, and there are loads of added benefits as well that I haven't even gone into. But if you want discount off Apple products, then you can get them through the union.
I didn't even know that myself, so I'm going to be researching that after this call. No, thank you for talking to me today. I think we've touched on quite a lot. Is there anything else that you feel like you want to mention? Or
do you know what? One of the things that I don't often get to talk about, Tom, is that because doing the stuff that we've already discussed through BECTU and the other campaigning work that I've done in the industry, often a lot of what I said can be perceived as negative. I would say that I always try to engage positively in what I do, because I don't want to present it in a negative way. But what I will say is that I really don't want anyone to be put off about joining the industry, about having a career in TV, because honestly, it can be the most rewarding and exciting thing that you can do. And I think, there are tough aspects of the industry, and hopefully they're going to get better with time. But the absolute privilege of doing the job is that you get to go to amazing places that you never normally get to go to. You get to have access to places that you would never normally, to get into, that the public, often doesn't get into. You honestly get to meet the most interesting and fascinating people in the world. Experts in their field at the top of their game, and also, real people as well who are the most interesting. And honestly, I've met people from all walks of life doing this job, and honestly, it's a privilege. I suppose I want to end on a positive, really. If you want to work in TV, absolutely. If you're passionate about telling people stories, if you're passionate about people, honestly, I don't think there's a better job you can do. The other thing that I will say quickly before we go, though, is that let's all remember, we're not saving lives here. No,
it's just TV.
It's only TV.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for talking to me, James. It's been a pleasure.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me, Tom.
If you have any questions that you'd like me to answer in future videos about the industry, then please just write them down below and I will try and get them answered. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. And again, thank you so much, James. Have a great evening.
No problem.
And I will see you very soon. Bye.
See ya.